like all good researchers, I have a discussion guide to help through this discussion. And I would just urge you to chip in at the end of the discussion in terms of asking your set of questions from any of the panelists or me. So with that, I'll just kick off this panel discussion, which is titled Enhancing Business Change Using Empathy to Connect with the Consumers. I'll cover 2-3 broad areas, and then would request the panelists to respond on some of the queries around those areas. The first one is, how do we, in your organizations, helping create and design content and marketing strategies which matter to customers? And I know that it's more a warm-up sort of question. But moving on, we would look at how we are looking at creating better consumer empathy. What would be some of the things that you would do in terms of maximizing consumer empathy in an increasingly digital world? And finally, we will talk about how the rise of AI and automation again impacts the brand's ability to empathize with consumers, and coming from a sort of qualitative backdrop. So that's what we will be covering. So just to kick off, Jason, what would be some of the important pieces of market research, consumer insights that you undertake in your organization to understand what's important for your consumers? Yeah, please.
Well, some of the most important research we do is focus on community panels, where we try to understand what customers are looking for in our products. So most of our research goes around product development, and also on what the brand means to our individual customers, because the freedom to ride, the adventure of riding, it's different to every person that owns a motorcycle, whether they're a current customer or someone who wants to own one.
Okay. Manu?
So for us in the foods space, I think it's important to understand, especially from a ready to consume or a ready to cook kind of a category, how she actually does this product. So ethnos is something that we use extensively. Increasingly, we've changed the technique as we moved along, where we used to stand there. Now we've, as we saw in the earlier presentation, now we've used a lot of mobile ethnography as well, where we let her cook in and understand how the entire process looks like. And beyond that, I think the regular research in terms of segmentation or the performance measurement, those kind of are regular researches that kind of are part and parcel of our daily life.
No, I think echoing similar to what both Jason and Anup said, I think there are regular pieces of research that you do to generate, health of business, how is it doing, trackers, markers, all of those. But I think increasingly there is a depth to understand in terms of why consumers are making certain choices or why they are not. Because for Fonterra, we are dealing with nutrition across life stages, from gestation till old age. So as the consumer life stage evolves, the needs and requirements also evolve. So to understand them at a more personal level in terms of how they make their choices, there is a good role that we see for qualitative ethnographies that we are doing. Plus, increasingly there's a lot more conversations, or we are listening into social listening or social conversations, just to see how consumers talk about brands and issues and challenges that they face. And then the attempt is always to seamlessly stitch them all together. We succeed sometimes, but not always.
Okay, great. Just follow up on that. How is this sort of changing or evolving over a period of time for you guys? I mean, the kind of stuff that you have been doing in the past versus what you're doing now, or what you're looking forward to doing in the future. I mean, the context is also this conference. So what is it that you see evolving for you as methodologies, as ways of thinking, as ways of doing things within your organizations to take this forward?
So I think for us, I would highlight two key things here. One is the process or the tools which change by themselves. So today we are talking about gamification, we are talking about using neuro, we are talking about an openness to try different methodologies, respecting the consumer in her true environment, which I think is something that has changed from a process perspective as well, that you can actually see a consumer with this digital age. You don't necessarily have to be in front of her. You can be at a remote place and yet see her, observe her in her true environment. I think that's a process change. The second thing that I want to highlight is about the attitude. As we have moved, we see that organizations have become more open. The top management is also more open in terms of approaching it with new methodologies. There is a risk-taking appetite that has increased with organizations. So we are open to trying different research modules, which earlier would often get countered with, is there a validation? Is there a number that I can see against this? Today that has changed, and gradually as we move forward, I think more and more emphasis will be given on the consumer pulse. And understanding the consumer in her true world, rather than bringing that validation along with it. I think those two key aspects for me kind of stand out as we move forward on this journey.
I think just echoing what Anup said, there's a little bit more openness to experimental approaches, things that we would have never tried or never done in the past. And the predominant reason why that is happening is that the consumer journey is not linear anymore. It's a lot more multi-layered, complex. We try to look at it from a moments of truth perspective, which is 0 moment, first moment, second moment. But the reality is that somebody's second moment of truth might be somebody's 0 moment of truth. So we are in a lot more flux right now, and with the digital age, this journey is becoming increasingly more complex. And to kind of get through that, we need a little bit more fresh thinking, evolved approaches. So I would say there is a little bit more openness to look at alternate techniques, alternate approaches. And the second thing that I would say is that a lot of the organizations that I see and work with, there is a lot more openness to infrastructure development with regard to data. Most organizations collect a huge amount of data through various sources, structured, unstructured. Previously, they will be in the file of the individual researcher. But now they are getting into more centralized systems, and there is a willingness to invest in some of those kind of infrastructure to facilitate better value extraction out of those things. So I think one is an approach aspect of it, and second is trying to look at it from a investment and a long-term perspective. I think that's the part that is where I start to see a shift happening.
Well, for Harley-Davidson, back in the early 1990s, we didn't really do a lot of market research. It was more focused on being with the customers, looking at the HOG members and trying to see what they're doing with their bikes, customizing it, and adding that into our new models. But in 2008, we started shifting our perspective and looking from the customer's point of view and being more customer-led. So what that meant was doing more qualitative research. We set up community panels, inviting current customers and competitor owners to try and understand what they're looking for in a product. So that would lead to new innovations in our models and what aspects of the bike they love the most in Harley.
I'll just add on to what Jason said, is that the whole aspect of community panels, I think we are also starting to embrace that idea for two reasons. One is the speed of feedback, that if you have a ready-made group of consumers that you can ask a few questions to, you can get some kind of qualitative, quantitative, anything but with a larger speed. Because in the absence of that, previously what would have happened is a bunch of people will get around a room and opinions are shared, and usually a decision is taken largely on opinions, not necessarily supported with facts all the way through. But because if you have a panel, you can quickly push in through a quick survey, get in a few quick responses, and then that actually enhances the decision making as opposed to replacing the decision making. So I would say the use of community panels has started, and I would see that more organizations would probably embrace it more in the future.
Cool. So essentially speed, new ways of looking at consumers, and also what Jason you mentioned, about getting into more qualitative in general to kind of figure out nuances from them. would be some of the changes that you have been seeing and in your organizations. Now, just a thing which then comes up is, would you share with the audience in terms of any examples of marketing inputs in for coming out from these insights, or product innovation which you felt was an example of something which helped come out with the new approaches and the insights that you have been looking at?
So in one of the products we developed in 2015, it was called the XG750. That was probably our most researched bike ever, because Harley's been known for its big engines, loud, big bikes. And one of the areas we were lacking was having a bike that was friendly for urban environments where people can go through traffic. Something that was liquid cooled so it doesn't heat up too much for tropical environments. So we spoke to a lot of customers within Asia and designed the XG750 with that in mind, and lowered the price point to try to extend our brand, not only to being limited to the higher income groups, but opening it up to the middle income as well, so we can extend our reach to more customers.
Was this something which was the first time that you would have gone in Asia first sort of strategy for designing a new product, or because when you say that you looked at softer sort of ruggedness on this, is it more to do with you were looking at the Asian market as the primary market for this bike? Or?
Well, we did the research internationally, but a lot of the focus was on Asia Pacific, because in the US it's very different, where motorcycling is not about getting from point A to point B. It's more on leisure riding. People do it seasonally. Unlike here, people use it as their main form of transportation. So we kept that in mind when we developed it.
Cool. Anup?
So actually, I have a session tomorrow where I'm going to talk about this.
so let's leave it for that. Okay.
I'll probably just talk about a recent example of a campaign idea that came through some of these newer approaches. So one of our brands is Anmum, that looks at more of maternal and infant nutrition kind of space. Now, I don't know if you have noticed, historically, all those kind of brands and products typically tend to speak to a mom, saying that, you are going through this process and going through this journey, and, we want to be a partner and all of that. But then I struggle to see any kind of comms that were targeted at the father. The father was almost like a casualty in the process, sort of. So there was this whole idea of, hey, why don't we express, the whole idea of welcoming a new member to the family or going through the journey, but through the eyes of a father. So, so there was a campaign idea that was sort of almost celebrating the Father's Day, but with a brand that is predominantly targeted at, women who are going through a certain life stage. So that would have not happened if, we are increasingly hearing conversations about women saying that, look, it's not my process alone, it's our process. That is the family coming together, or the man and woman coming together. And that was sort of the genesis of the idea of speak to the man as well. And being a new dad myself, I thought it was a pretty interesting approach to a category which was always targeting women.
Congratulations on being a new dad. Okay, good. So moving on, one of the things which I picked up also from the sessions in the morning was about the whole area of social listening, and there is so much which is available and present in the digital space about your brands. My question to you would be, how do you, within your systems, separate the wheat from the chaff? So how do you, make sense of that in terms of what is meaningful, useful, I'm seeing it and it has, sort of legs, versus what is primarily noise, which I might hear but need to discard. So any thoughts on that?
I'll go on this one. So it's a very good observation in this whole signal versus noise kind of issue. And I know that somebody from Facebook might be here, so pardon me for what I'm about to say next. So it's my observation is like this, like I think any brand has got Facebook stuff, a Facebook page, a landing page, and a lot of these things. And you get a whole bunch of metrics from Facebook, and not just Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, so and so. What I've realized is that in absolute, they are actually a little bit closer to noise. But when you stretch them over a period of time, you look at from a time series perspective, actually they become closer to a bit of a signal. So I think it's a question of like 100,000 likes in itself means nothing. But if I sort of map it over a period of time and then put my marketing and other initiatives, it starts to give some sense. It's still not completely there. And the other thing that we have tried to do, and again, it's a bit of a test and learn, there's no correct answer here, is that you have your standard measures that you get in the organization. You have your trackers, you have your retail audits and all of those things. And where I find the role for some of these social listening is that it actually plugs in some of the gaps in terms of how the conversion happens between consideration and trial, and does the role of a Facebook or any kind of social conversation have a role in sort of filling the gaps within the journey. So when we approach it from filling the gaps and look at it from a longer term perspective, I feel a little bit more of signal emerges. And if you look at it in absolute, it becomes a little less useful. So I guess it's a bit of hybrid trial and error kind of approach. And we are learning as we go. We still haven't, I would say, claimed to perfect it, but we are learning how to do it.
To kind of echo what you just said in terms of being a kind of a learning approach as we are looking at this piece. The analogy I would like to kind of call out over here, it's like, like we analyze our shares, or like we analyze our sales figures, you go deep down and you kind of understand where exactly this particular brand is gaining or losing and what's exactly happening. On its own, the entire data is like that one number. At an all India, maybe your share loss is 4%. What does that translate into? Which channels and so on and so forth is necessary to be done. Likewise, if I look at an absolute all-encompassing kind of a number, it is hardly going to give me any kind of a granularity or an understanding. So using the structured data like the trackers or the markers and your sales performance and your campaigns that you have done, in conjunction when you put this perspective of what is happening online, then is where you will be able to make some sense, and you will see whether a particular activity is getting traction, whether a particular activity has been really effective, or is this noise in the data. If there was a Father's Day campaign that we had done, no pun intended, then it's the data that we are seeing is in response to what we have done. So that kind of in conjunction and holistic approach is necessary. And like Deepak said, there's no mastery on this. It's still a developing process and a test and learn for us as we are moving along. And we're developing and we're learning each day or each month as we start looking at these pieces. And hopefully in days to come, this will be an important tool that will get captured like our trackers and other data points have.
Well, at Harley, we do a lot of analytics as well, but our customers are very passionate about their brand, and their motorcycle is like an extension of their personality. So we fuel that passion, and we engage them through social media. We post pictures of custom bikes, and then we ask them, hey, what do you think of this bike? And post a picture of your bike. What have you done? So majority of our customers do things differently with their motorcycles to make it truly theirs. They don't keep it at stock.
Yeah. I guess to both of your points, it's if I'm understanding it right, it's still more use the lens of what I have as structured already existing stuff, and then look out into the whole social space to see whether it is getting ratified or what sort of things I'm getting, versus some of the approaches which we have seen earlier and I'm sure later on as well, is more about go absolutely without any lens or without any baggage or without any pre-condition into listening to what the consumers are saying and then derive meaning out of that. So I guess it's a journey which is sort of going to emerge and come out somewhere in the middle, where you have some context, but you're also looking at slightly more open-ended stuff, and maybe also evoking some ideas through pushing your own channels of communication or product innovations and getting feedback from consumers on the social listening platform. Just one more bit on this, which is one thing which is a thing on the social media is you generally get a lot of consumers who are slightly more polarized. So you either have people who are sort of saying bravo, great, fantastic, or you have people who are saying it is absolutely rubbish, whatever be the sort of context of the brand or product, etc. Now, how do you deal with that sort of stuff? What is it that you feel is important, not so important? Be sensitive to it, yet not overdraw yourself in terms of going crazy. So how do you deal with this sort of polarized response, especially on social media?
Well, Harley is not a stranger to that, where people either love us or hate us. So that's a pretty tough question. We normally don't engage when people, have their opinion about negative opinion about the bike, because there's always going to be the direct opposite of someone who loves that bike. So what normally happens is our own customers end up defending us instead of us having to engage those people who hate the brand. So we don't do anything. And we have this whole argument on comments on why they like the bike and why they don't like the bike. So it's just come to personal opinion, I guess.
So for us, it's a bit different. I think the essence or the most important aspect is the agility with which you respond to an irate comment or to a positive comment as well, because somebody has taken the effort to kind of put something on social media. I think one needs to respect that, which is something that we generally follow. We would not claim that we are the best at it, but there is a genuine effort in terms of the turnaround time, at least to respond to any kind of a question or a comment that's been posted. Mostly for us, there are cases when either a mom is tried a recipe and it didn't work. So maybe you personally send her a video of this is the way that you could have done it, and we would like to understand it. So that empathy is felt as to where exactly did it kind of not go right. For a premium brand like Haagen-Dazs, not the right comparison to an Harley, but from a premium ice cream perspective, we often get complaints which are related to maybe price, and there is not much that you're going to do in that particular platform about a price, but you would want to respond from a position of strength as to why is it that this ice cream is at the premium, and why is it that you're really offering that kind of an experience to the consumer, and you would want to leave it at that. So respond quickly. Empathize with the consumer stating, and try as much as possible to get back with the position of a strength, from a position of a strength, saying this is the way it is from our side. So I think that kind of helps in a lot of cases. That's pretty much what it is. And then it doesn't always resolve, and then you maybe want to take it offline at times.
I think because it's a qualitative conference, I'll say this. Sometimes I think the simplest way to look at it is that you can look at all your social conversation as probably the largest unmoderated, self-moderated group that is running out there. So you want to come in at the right times. You want to listen with a certain amount of active listening to listen on and identify issues which may be on the periphery, which may be on the edge. And I would say there is a bit of art and science to it, So, I mean, in most organizations, there is a brand manager or some kind of a brand team which is sort of listening it on a fairly regular basis. And sometimes they can use that to pick up pulse of something which before it becomes something big and, something that you want to avoid. So the judgment comes in terms of figuring out what to hear and what not to hear. And the other thing is that, there are certain guidelines that most organizations have that depending on the nature of the comment or complaint or this thing, there are guidelines in terms of turnaround times, respond. There are, indicators that have been put there and people are measured against that. So I would say there is a bit of, sort of having a clear guidance in terms of how to respond, but there is also a part which is a bit unstructured, open, and you leave it to the people to sort of manage the situation.
Cool. I think just to take on from what you just mentioned about the fact that there is a judgment aspect to all of this management, which brings me to my next sort of follow-up part on this. Now, a lot of this could be automated in terms of using, bots or AI, etc. In terms of almost predicting, or premonition of what could happen, and therefore how will I respond to it. Is there something which you are seeing, if not in terms of practice, but in terms of discussion and talk in your organizations, where this is sort of coming up as a thing to handle some of the wider variety of resolving things, especially when it is coming to a more and more increasingly online world. So, is this something that you're picking up?
So honestly, from an India dimension, not really. We are still in a phase wherein the consumer would want a personalized response. My problem is unique to me, and you resolve my problem is her need. And in the categories that we operate, it is important to understand where exactly what is the nature of the issue that is at hand. From an India dimension, I don't see a lot of automation from a response time perspective that is being deployed for us.
Well, for Harley, there's not a lot of automation, but we use different lines to connect with customers. So the customer has the option to call in to speak to someone at the dealership. They can contact the corporate office directly. We've recently been more active with digital campaigns where people can sign up for newsletters, raise their hand if they want to do a test ride. And from there, we just make sure the callers follow up on those leads who are interested and give them more information about the product and what they're interested in and how to help them with their journey into Harley.
Yeah. I think I'll use an analogy here to sort of explain. I mean, and if you follow Formula One, there are two main parts to it. There is a machine and then there's a man. So the magic happens when both of them synchronize in a perfect way to sort of deliver that great experience. So I think the whole balance between automation and a personal thing, and a personal or somebody talking at the end of the line, is a very delicate balance to sort of achieve. So I think there could be a role where both could come into play. So to give a very basic example, let's say somebody drops in a line or a comment or something. The automation can take care of the fact saying that, hey, look, we have received your thing, we are looking into it. Or somebody, a human, will call you back in 24 hours. So that way, the balance is achieved in the sense that the automation delivered the speed and then the human delivered the human touch, if I may say so. And therefore, the balance is what I feel is essential to get it right, rather than it being a debate on, should it be led by a machine or should it be led by a man?
Yeah, got it. So the last thing which I just want to pick up was, there is in the reaching out to the customers in this whole thing, and I'll again take the example of social media sites like Facebook and other sites, where it's almost chasing a consumer. If you have sort of on the online world posted a query about XYZ, then you're almost chased along the way. Now, and that leaves me with a question where, what is the thin line between actually helping the customer make a choice by being present at all the right points versus invasion of their privacy? It's almost like in a good sort of restaurant, you have customers who will sort of hope that the bearer will be there whenever they need him, but is not invading their privacy in terms of their conversation and their meal. So what would be your sort of sense of this general feel about what's the right level at which one should pitch, and how do you go about it?
So again, very difficult question. I don't think there is one perfect answer to it. I feel that if you know too much about your consumers also, that's a bit of a problem, because it starts getting into slightly creepy, voyeuristic kind of territory. You don't want to go there. I don't know, some time ago there was this very famous article that you might have seen about Target. Their consumer analytics was evolved to such a level that they could predict that this young lady was pregnant even before her own family kind of knew it, and they started selling customized coupons knowing her pattern of purchase and all. Now that is it is one of those things which is very polarizing. It can be very shocking that somebody knows so much about me, and it can be pleasantly surprising that, hey, here is somebody who's ahead of the curve. You can't predict how the consumer will respond to it. So getting the balance right is I would say critical. Now we have come from an age where cookies used to be the standard measurement. Now there is an evolution of cookie going into cross-device tracking and all, and that can feel a bit obtrusive at times. So you have to do it with a certain amount of balance and finesse. You can easily get this wrong very, very quickly. So to answer you, Pankaj, I don't know what the perfect answer is, but I think it's a question of getting the balance right, learning from the processes, maybe learning from others' mistakes, and try to be a little bit more sensible about it.
Yeah, kind of. It's a tricky one, right? I mean, you gave the Target example. There was a live case with a colleague of ours, and we were on an off-site, and we were playing music from her phone, and it was on YouTube. And then these pregnancy-related ads kind of start playing in between, and it was an uncomfortable kind of a silence in the entire room because she had not disclosed it to anybody. And at that point in time, and we were like, oh, okay, so everybody knew why this is being played. She herself thought, oh, what is happening? And she just kind of clicked on skip. But it was an extremely uncomfortable moment for all of us in an offsite kind of a setup. So where is the line? If going back to that particular question, and we don't know where exactly that the line is. Often we tend to assume as the knowledge base increases, your awareness for these details and the permissibility kind of goes down. So the mass may be open because they are maybe less aware of what exactly is getting tracked. I can click on an I accept button and I don't know what all is going to get tracked for me. Versus somebody who's more evolved digital consumer who may think that, oh no, this is not something that is permissible. So it's a tricky line, and we will come to know with time that where exactly what is permissible and what is not permissible, not going by what is the awareness level for a consumer, because that should not be our guideline for determining because the mass is unaware, I can go ahead and do this. That should not be our guiding principle. And I think with time we will come to know where exactly we stand on this. But today, yes, this is something which is bothersome. As marketeers, it bothers us as well when we deploy it, which ideally it should. And we need to be cognizant of what is the right level. And there's no easy answer to that, to your question.
Yeah, that's a really sensitive topic now. So in terms of collecting information, it is important to know your customers. But in terms of Harley, we don't have a single customer segment. We have majority would be in their mid-40s to 50s. But everyone is at a different stage when they get into writing. And you can't be too specific in targeting certain customer groups, because when you're talking about something that someone's passionate about, it doesn't matter what age or gender you are. So we use the information less on trying to target for advertising, but just more to understand the customer journey on how they're starting their writing experience, where they came from, what models they used to buy, and how we can help them through the rest of their journey with writing.